Welcome to the Power of Youth Plus, the vertical format of your favorite show, The Power of Youth. I'm your host, Enoch Wong from Hong Kong, China. We're at this beautiful campus, so before we start the show, why don't we take a look at the campus of Capital University of Economic and Business. Let's go. Oh wow, what a beautiful campus of the Capital University of Economic and Business. And while we do that, we also asked the student on this campus this following question. When do you use a foreign language? And we have invited guests from around the world to join us. Say hi to the camera.
Hello. Hello.
And then what you have to do is to guess what is the top 5 answer, and then we'll have a little conversation in the meanwhile too. Shall we have the ladies first? So, ladies first, when do you use a foreign language? What do you think?
When I use foreign language, when I was starting, or when after watching a movie.
Let's do one answer at a time. Studying, right? You mentioned studying.
Studying.
Studying is one of the top answers. We are at the university, so and there are teachers here as well. So yes, studying is one of the top answer. Studying here as well, right? So maybe possibly we can go to the instructors here. Can you share a little bit about your experience of teaching here at the university? What surprises you, or what is the most remarkable moment that you have?
Okay, you want me to go first?
Yes, why not?
Okay. Well, I've been teaching here now for over 6 years. Okay?
Nice.
What has surprised me the most, I think, is how diligent and hardworking the students are. There's a lot of high expectations in universities. We expect a lot of our students, and I think most of our students are quite diligent and quite willing to study, and they're really willing to share their opinion and their thinking, which makes teaching here quite enjoyable.
Interesting. Doug?
Well, I think the thing that surprises me most is that the students are always really welcoming to you as a teacher. So, because I think sometimes as a foreigner working in a foreign country, it can be a little bit isolating. And I really think like the students here at this university are always like really happy to see you. They're always really happy to learn a bit more about your culture. And they don't need to be, right? It's studying. You could just like sit in your room.
Absolutely.
But they're always really open. So that's
What are
great.
some of the differences? I assume China is not the first country that you work at.
No.
No, right? And both you're from Scotland, you're from the US. What are some of the differences you will see, teaching in China and, for example, in another country? Doug?
I think the biggest difference here from the UK is the exams here, I think, are more stressful than the ones we have in Scotland.
Okay.
So in Scotland, we don't really have standardised testing. And so in China, obviously, you definitely do have standardised testing. The Gaokao coming up, right?
Yep.
Big thing. And so I think the exams, like the exam culture here is much, much more intense than in Scotland, which I think can be a good thing and a bad thing. Like exams are stressful, but also I think it also motivates the students to kind of maybe work harder as well.
Does that mean that most students here learn, for example, a foreign language to pass exam as opposed to use it as communication, and how does that affect your teaching?
Yes, I would say the vast majority of students, especially outside the English department, are learning English primarily because we have an exam. We need to learn that. And I think it's like affects your teaching a little bit because on the one hand, you want the language to not just be something for studying. You want the language to be about a tool they're going to use and they're going to learn about culture. But on the other hand, exams are important. So you have to kind of balance the two as a teacher and make sure that they can pass the exam, because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing really for them, if we're honest. But also try and give them like, no, this doesn't need to just be for studying, which hopefully some of them have taken on board, because I can see studying is only number 3.
Yep. And Cormac, what's your view on this?
So building up upon what Doug says, well, because it is an exam-based learning, it means that most of the students come to our classes expecting us to be like, well, this is the test, this is the answer that you're going to give. And that means that oftentimes it takes them longer to do things like form their own opinion and stuff like that. But the way I try to incorporate it, because I think in learning a language, one of the things is knowing how to express yourself, is I always remind my students that a lot of them who are studying English want to take examinations like the IELTS or other examinations to go study abroad or wish to study abroad. And as part of studying abroad, you need to feel comfortable sharing your opinion. So one of the things I always try to do is try to kind of find a balance of saying, yes, I know sharing your opinion is not something that you are commonly going to do, or you may not feel comfortable doing this, but remember...
And especially in a foreign language as well.
Exactly.
And that's even more challenging. Yeah.
But if you're going to take the IELTS examination, and I've seen some of us that look at IELTS questions, the IELTS questions are essentially opinion questions. Like, you can't, like, you don't know what the IELTS questions are going to be, and I can't say to you, hey, if you want to take this exam, these are going to be the answers. So what I try to do is find that balance of like, okay, a lot of the practice questions I use to get them to share their opinion, I structure them in a style that a foreign exam might ask them. And I try to teach them to answer these opinion questions in the structure for exam, so you're kind of covering both.
Yeah, so kind of have this win-win situation, right?
Yes.
So for example, for me, I studied mathematics in undergraduate degree. And when I came across the idea of academic learning, also academic writing, that was very, very surprising. It's about how to craft an argument a little bit similar to what you share as well. Is this something that you come across? Because I assume you also teach graduate students as well.
Well, so I'm one of the writing teachers here. I teach most of the English academic writing classes here. And yeah, you're 100% correct, right? Like, academic writing is completely different from everyday normal writing, and it can be, again, a bit of a balance, bro.
I want to go to tone a little bit here, because I think the way we write, for example, in Chinese and in English is slightly different, right? For example, in Chinese, you most often write from an author perspective, where in English, as I understood it, you mostly write for the readers, which leave little room for interpretation, where in Chinese, most of the time, it's about open for interpretation. One sentence can be interpreted very, very differently by different people, and that's okay as well. For you, do you run into difficulties in this? Particularly, you learn translation too.
I think when I learn translation, the most difficult things for me is the basic logic thinking is different, very different. So I think this is the first conflict when you try to learn the different culture. You need to know the basic thinking method, or the way the foreign people thinking about. So this is, I think, is the big difficulty.
And then what I understood is that there's a lot of different elements that is included besides just words that we see on paper. So let's move on to, let's see if what else they use foreign language for. Cormac, let's go to you.
I was going to guess in class.
In class, that would be the same as studying.
I'll be the same as studying. Okay.
It is a very typical answer for a teacher, and that's the most ideal answer for a teacher, hopefully. But yes.
In class,
yes.
I was going to say maybe at a restaurant ordering food.
Let me give you that as number 5. Number 5 is actually making friends. So you go to order food with friends, socializing.
That's very generous, okay? I acknowledge I was completely off.
So it's about this socialization, and I think that's go back to some of the conversation that we have, that, right? Yes, we study, we use English and pass exam, and I think that's one element of it. But at the same time, communicating, right, is also a part of this as well. Doug, what else do you think is on the board?
So I want to guess traveling.
Traveling.
Because I think that's a big thing, because lingua franca, right, is English.
Yep.
So I'm going to say traveling is one of the ones.
Traveling is not quite there. Do you want to give another shot?
Oh, okay.
We're really bad at this.
Yeah. Watching movies then. Like
watching movies. When you get a second chance, you go right to the top.
Yeah.
So yes, watching movie, films, and TV. Okay. Do you use this medium to teach English as well? Is that one of the ways? Do you encourage it?
So I encourage it. I don't really use it. Because I think, like, in the modern world, right, if you want to watch a film or a TV show, you can do that in your dorm room. You don't need me to show you a movie in class, right? I think that's a bit of a waste of time for a teacher to do.
Okay.
I would certainly encourage foreign language learners to watch a movie or TV in the target language, but I wouldn't really use it in the classroom.
Because what I also want to prompt is, how internet, particularly, pop culture, such as, a TV and film, etc., sort of influence language learning. Particularly, a lot of times, you cover that a little bit in the last discussion, is that they don't use textbook English per se. Sometimes they use slang, sometimes they integrate different sort of cultural aspect into it. Does that kind of get in the way of you're teaching the correct textbook English, so to speak?
No, not really, because I think, like, what I would say is actually, like, You're right, there's a difference between textbook English and the English we're going to be using online or in everyday life. But I think actually like modern technology has made learning a foreign language easier than it really ever has been. Because you can go on any social media app, you can go on any platform and just like get access to it in a way that you could not do 20, 30 years ago. So 20, 30 years ago, it's just textbook. Now you can get the textbook and you can get online access.
Interesting. You wanted to add on to
Yeah, so I would say, like, once again, we don't have our students watch movies and TV in class, of course, but I actually really do encourage my students to watch film and TV for really another reason, which is like modernity. So one of the things I always talk about my students about is, like, a lot of our students like to use idioms, and one of the idioms that always comes up is like, life is like a box of chocolate.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always say to my students is like, well, putting aside that's a little cliched, I think the problem about you using this idiom is you're basing it off a movie that was released in 1994, and most of you, all of our students now are post-2000s.
Yeah.
And I think it can be, you know, one of the things I think it's actually really important for our students to watch movies and film is just to like understand modern culture, because for our students, a lot of them who like to watch films and TV, they watch things like Friends, which isn't a bad show per se, but the United States in the late 1990s and the early 2000s is very, very different than today. So I always try to encourage my students to like watch modern stuff, watch updated stuff. Also because I think that on a wider scope, like especially pre-COVID, like a lot of these films just became so much important like pop culture. So like I always tell my students, like, yeah, you should watch like the Marvel films. Like even now the Marvel films oftentimes, especially before, but even now, like they come up in pop culture conversation. You know, when Avengers came out, like everyone was talking about Avengers. And when the students don't watch these modern films or modern TV shows, like you're missing the opportunity to be able to talk to other people about this. Because like, once again, I don't think most people are talking about Friends. And if Friends is the only TV show you know, that really limits your conversation to be able to talk to other people. So I always encourage them to watch film and TV just so they know like what is modern pop culture. If you meet an international student or meet a English speaker in China and you want to talk about something, we talk about pop culture. We talk about the, you know, sports, movies and stuff like that. And therefore you kind of have to watch the modern stuff. You need to know what is happening.
And of course, they can also engage in different conversation on social media as well. Let's turn to the learner. Do you use movies, do you use TV to help you to learn English, and in what way?
Yes, because I want to see.
Do you watch Friends? Do you watch?
I watch movies. Actually, my major in undergraduate is account. It's not English. It's not major English translation. Because in my leisure time, I like to watching movies like some music player, or watch some music music movies, and I like to listen English music as well. So when I watching movies, then that's kind of stuff that hit my mind that I decided to learn the major related to English.
You kind of fill in the gap, because I hope it's nice to hear from the instructor perspective, you don't learn English to pass exam, but also as a way to understand what's going on around the world as well. And there's sort of a different purpose that you put into using English besides just passing exams too. Let's have this open discussion. What else do you think is on it?
I don't know, but reading, so what have we had? We've got watching TV films, studying, make friends.
Yeah.
What else would you use a foreign language for?
That's what I was like.
We are at the University of Capital, University of Economic and...
Oh, so applying for jobs, so they're doing it for business?
Yes, perfect. And I think that's the reason why working and like international business was one of the more popular answers that we gotten when we walk around the campus. So you touch on it a little bit, speaking about, so at this moment, English is the dominant lingua franca in the world. I wonder, like, from all of your perspective, do you think this will remain in the foreseeable future, or would that change? What do you think?
So I think, like, it depends what you mean.
Okay.
Because I think like English is, for the foreseeable future, going to be an important language of global communication.
Yep.
Right? However, I don't think it is going to be as dominant as it is in this moment forever. We can already see that, like in China, interest in learning English for every single student is declining, right? Because, let's be honest, the majority of people who grow up in China do not use English for their everyday environment. So I think what's going to happen, especially as we see countries like China, countries like Vietnam, countries like India becoming more and more developed, we're going to see more and more people, especially in places like Africa, go, okay, I can choose to learn Chinese or I can choose to learn English. Maybe Chinese makes more sense to me. So I'm not saying Chinese is going to replace English, but I think the dominance of English is going to...
So English will be less important, and then you don't think there's a particular language that will replace English, it will just be more diverse choices for learners of foreign languages.
Yeah, because I think like the reason that English is the lingua franca are very particular historical reasons that are not going to come back.
Okay. Cormac, what do you think?
I'm gonna say like, because I feel like Doug's answer is kind of like both-siding it, very much both-siding it. But I'm actually going to go straight off and go, yes, I think English is going to stay the dominant language.
Yeah.
It's not just for historical reasons. I think historical reasons there is. But I think more importantly, it's actually about the flexibility of the language.
Okay.
Okay. English is a very, very flexible language. And English is a language that is really quite easy to understand. It's, you know, so I think like what some of the benefits is like English is a language that adapts very, very easily. And I think that's one of the reasons why English spread so quickly. You know, it's pretty flexible in grammar. It's, you know, easy to communicate. You don't really need a lot of words to communicate well in English. So I think like when you think about a language like Mandarin, which is much more structured and much more limited, I think it makes it much more harder for people to learn. And I think like that flexibility of English makes it so much easier. And not to mention, I think like at the end of the day, we also just have to kind of talk about like the dominance of English in like most things. Like I always remind my students is like at the moment between 85% and 90% of all academia is still published in English. So to order to like change to another language, we're looking for not just a replacement in daily life, we're looking for a replacement in so many different stages of life. Now, I agree with Doug, like there are a lot of people who are never ever going to use or need English. And just like I think, not just in China, but in every country, like, yeah, but I still think like internationally, English will still have that dominance level just because it's already been so integrated into so many different societies. And then not to mention, it's just such a flexible and easy language for everyone to kind of play around with.
So let me challenge you a little bit, because both of you teach English, you learn English, of course. It is in all of your interest to have English to maintain as the medium of communication.
Yeah.
But what would be some of the reasons that it might not be? And do you think there will be another language that will replace it?
I think if there was another language that would replace it, it would actually more be like Spanish, because once again, Spanish is oftentimes considered the world. Like a lot of people have said that Spanish is constantly considered one of the world's easiest languages to learn, which is why like Escampanto, the idea of a world language, was based mostly off Spanish. So I think like I could see like Spanish or something that's just easier to learn, because I think like ultimately one of the things about learning language for a lot of people is actually like easiness. And I think like you see a lot of people who take Spanish, like you ask them like, why did you take Spanish? They're like, oh, it's a really easy language to learn. So I think that could be a...
That's very, very interesting, because I'm from Hong Kong, and of course we use the traditional Chinese character. And I think when Chinese Putonghua was standardized across China, one of the first things that was done is to make it simplified, right? And I think I'm hearing a little bit of the similar reasoning that ease of learning is a very, very important element to be used by most of the people across the world. Sorry, Doug, you were about to say something.
Well, I think ease of learning is only a small part though, right? Because like, so for example, the easiest language for an English learner to learn is Dutch, but no one learns it. Why? Because there's no point. It's such a tiny little...
The demand is also a very, very important element.
So I think demand, like the economic demand, the working demand, like we see there, work, study, like if you speak Dutch, you can only work in Amsterdam, right?
Yeah.
So I think like ease of language is definitely a part of it, but I don't think it's the only part of it. Otherwise, we would all be speaking Dutch.
Very interesting. So let's go to the final topic, because we're running a little bit short of time. What else do you think is on it? I think you mentioned it very, very briefly in your sharing just now. Where else would you use a foreign language? Any ideas?
Artificial intelligence?
Not exactly.
Online?
That's what I guessed.
Online
Online chatting.
Everywhere. So let me reveal the answer, and let's so music, right? I think you covered a little bit. I think maybe we could have mixed it up with here. So you mentioned artificial intelligence, music. I was just now I was browsing one of the short video platform, and then they were sharing how AI can now generate music from scratch. And of course, AI is increasingly prominent, particularly generative AI being used. I wonder, do you think AI is going to take your job one day, replace being an instructor? I don't know, have you interact with generative AI? Obviously, you hope not, but what do you think?
Didn't Elon Musk just say AI is going to replace all jobs? Isn't that what he said like 2 days ago?
Between now and what Elon Musk think, where do you think instructor foreign language stand in that timeline?
No, I don't think it's going to replace the need for a lecturer position in language.
How about learning a language? Do you think it will replace the need of learning a foreign language? Particularly as a translator major, right? There's great AI that can do translation almost instantly.
Sure, depends what you're using it for, though.
Yep.
Right? So like when I was a kid, if we wanted to go to France, you would buy a little booklet that had phrases in French, so you could arrive in Paris and go, "Je suis Doug," right? That is going to die. You don't need that anymore, right? So that kind of thing's dying because you can use AI. However, I think we can agree that language is more than just being able to translate stuff, right? It's part of a culture, it's part of an experience. And I don't think AI can replicate that. I don't think, no matter how sophisticated AI translation gets, it's never going to be able to replicate the ability of speaking to a new friend in a foreign language.
Also, I think like in terms of AI and translation, I mean, like, I hate to bring us back to the days of COVID, but as we remember from COVID, like WeChat became very, very famous between foreigners for like terrible AI translation. And like even now, like WeChat translation is still kind of like iffy because like I think like one of the problems with like AI translation is when we come to like slang and how languages evolves, it doesn't seem like AI is quite caught up yet. So I think like there will still be a need for like one-on-one translation because if you're fluent in both languages and you understand like the nuances of the language, I think that's where AI really struggles.
There's context, there's culture that's
like,
in it.
They're like all those nuances, like until AI can kind of pick that up, I think it's actually really quite difficult. And also I think lastly, like as teachers, this is something we actually talked about yesterday, it's like still right now, like most of the time when students hand us a writing and it's written by AI, like you can tell. Or even like film, I mean, some people like talk about film a lot, like, you know, when you watch a movie that's written by AI, at the moment it's just something that like it lacks a heart. And it sounds really weird because like there's still such a humanity, I think, to like writing or telling a story that AI just hasn't figured out yet. So like even now, like when a student hands us a paper that's written by ChatGPT, like a lot of teachers, they read it and they go, oh, this is written by ChatGPT, not because there's any grammatical mistakes or any sort of like vocabulary mistakes, there's just something about it that's missing. So until AI can like replicate that, I think it'll be really, really hard.
And do you think AI will? I think what I'm hearing is that AI is not there yet. If generative AI is there, do you think it will?
Well, I don't think it's
because
actually
there's something
whether or not it's
special
going to get there or not there, but I think it's like this. So starting earlier in America, they're starting doing self-service checkouts. And right now, in McDonald's and all these places in China, there are still self-service checkouts. And we are used to doing like WeChat and all kinds of stuff. But waiters and waitresses haven't been replaced. Most of these places still allow you. And I think there is a human touch that as people we like. So I'm saying, I don't think like I think AI will become more prominent. And I'm sure as teachers, we are going to have to figure out what that means. But I think there's still a human touch that technology doesn't offer. Because like, I think the best example is like self-checkout machines. Yes, self-checkout has been popular even longer in the US. You know, I remember in the late 1990s, they started doing self-checkout and everyone said, oh, self-checkout is going to replace the cashier. But in America today, there are still places that self-checkout and they have places with cashier because at the end of the day, there are people who are always going to want that human element. And I think AI at the end of the day won't be able to replace that.
I think, though I think I would argue increasingly in China, there are stores without unmanned store where you can just scan a code or you can just take something. And because of the facial recognition technology, you're able to kind of complete that process. But I do agree there's this human element. What if you have a question? You prefer talking to a human than talking to a machine. So to wrap up this, I would really, really love to continue this conversation, but time is limited. So to wrap up, there's a lot of language learner, foreign language learner from around the world who are watching this, maybe in English, maybe in Spanish, maybe in other languages as well. What advices do you have from an instructor perspective and from a student perspective? Let's start with a student and then we'll move on that way. What recommendation advices do you have for future language learners?
I think if you want to learn another language, first you need to, maybe you can start with a movie.
Start with a movie, get you interested in learning language besides exam. Cormac.
Well, I think that to build that, it's just like have fun with it, you know? It's easier to do something if you enjoy it, so learn to figure out how to have fun with it. There's so many apps these days, Duolingo comes to mind, that have turned
Gamification.
Yeah, like the gamification of learning language. Like, just have fun with it, you know? Enjoy it, meet people that you enjoy talking in the language with.
I can already imagine some of your classes are really, really fun. I'd love to join one day. Doug, what do you think?
Make a friend, right? I think like a lot of the language is finding a context, finding a context to use it. So yeah, make a friend in the language you want to learn and go and talk to them.
Absolutely. Make friends. I'm so glad we make friends today. We got to speak a little bit. I hope all of us watching here are enjoying this particular episode. We spoke a lot today about language beyond just being a tool, but also a way to communicate and so many different things that we can do with a foreign language. I hope you are now interested in learning one other foreign language. Maybe it will be useful one day. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.